Well, hello everybody. A lot to talk about this morning. I'll give it that few minutes to let people log on. It's um it's interesting. It's interesting what's happened with both the use of the Indian Act 1876 as well as the Emergency Measures Act implemented and in force yesterday officially. Going to be 30 days of that. Um, a lot of overreach, in my opinion. I don't believe it should have ever been used, but that's not stopping the federal government. There's even more breaking news and taxation for Canadians going forward, as now both Liberals and Conservatives start to weigh in on the system of buck is a buck when we talk about revenue taxation versus capital taxation. And specifically, we're talking about positive capital taxation. It's big in news right now. At least not every Canadian's allowed to read that news. You have to have money to be able to read those news stories. Unfortunately, the first class always loves to borrow, rape and pillage the third, and often second class, at least those in domestic small business. We've seen that throughout the years. Governments never get enough of money. They sure love to spend, they sure love to buy votes, but what now does it mean for all of you going forward? What does this morning's judgment about Tamara Lynch mean for criminality going forward? Well, it's going to mean likely Pat King too. He comes up later this afternoon. I don't think either of them are going to get out. And here's the problem, folks. Both Tamara and Pat King have claimed First Nation status. They're getting a double whammy sword. Whether they are or not, it looks a lot like that isn't actually the truth. But I guess we'll let courts determine that. Emergency Measures Act, I told you they can keep you in jail indefinitely throughout the Emergency Measure Act period. But there's more than just that. There's more for those who claim to be Treaty Indian or of the First Peoples underneath the Indian Act. You actually lose more rights than under the Emergency Measures Act. If you don't believe me, talk to any First Nations person who's been throughout the criminal justice system. In fact, you can look at how many people today are in prison in Canada per capita from all other racial ethnic groups, and you'll find in Canada, like the United States for black individuals, you'll find in Canada that the First Peoples are the overwhelming per person per capita population of our prisons. That's all across every province and all federal institutions. It's a sad reality of a broken society. Is criminality only race related? Well, if that was true, how come in the United States of America it is not the American Indian that's rotting in prison? It's by a large margin, it's blacks. You come to Canada, it's the First Peoples by a large margin. Unfortunately for Tamara and Pat King, along with the Emergency Measures Act, we see Chris released on his own recognizance, but not Tamara, and it won't be Pat King. They've claimed Canadian Indian status, which puts them under the Indian Act, a far more suppressive and absolutely human rights violating code. But it's law in Canada. Canada's allowed to be a human rights violator until somebody takes them to the International Criminal Court. To do that, we need a gross genocide. That's why I've been working diligently on residential school genocide. So likely today, Pat King's not going anywhere. He's claimed Indian status, so the judge is going to throw the book at him as though he's a regular everyday Indian in Canada, just as Tamara Litch was, as she claimed to be Métis. That's what happens to you. You want to be Indian, they will treat you as inhumanely as every other Indian they treat in Canada. Far, far past anything the Americans have recorded. We see, like I said again, the African American is by large the highest represented of the population, of all that ethnicities per capita. It's Black Americans, African Americans. In Canada, it's by large the Canadian Indian. And when you look at the States with the American Indian, how come this isn't equivalent? Why is it not equivalent? Not even close, not by any margin. Well, that's easy, everybody. It's called the Indian Act of 1876 versus Richard Nixon's Education and Full Self-Government Sovereignty Acts 1971 to 1975, completed by Ford after Richard Nixon was caught doing Watergate. He had to resign. But the work was done. Gerald Ford got it done. And you know what? American Indians have never had such a best time in relation to American history as they do now from those days forward. A lot of people don't want to look at that, but you never hear about American Indians hardly ever on the news unless it's in relation to historic findings, new lands discovered, but you'll never hear anything outside of maybe Pennsylvania, some parts of Ohio. But again, where does that all come from? Oh yeah, British Quebec. Read your history books. Not everything from the States is America's fault. There was a whole pile of colonialism in the United States. America fought to get rid of them all. For First Nations in Canada who don't know, every American tribe has a constitution. It was a legal requirement. This was done, ladies and gentlemen. This was done ever since 1971 and onward. It's called being part of the United States. That's how you do it. Can't get self-government, and I don't know why people keep messaging when I do these, but it's all part of self-government, self-determination, and freeing the peoples. That's happened in the United States of America. Massive lands back. You don't see that in Canada. Not even close. Not even in a minuscule of a percent. The differences are shocking. It's disgusting. And for anyone who claims you can't have a nation in a nation, just go look next door to the United States of America. Richard Nixon did that. Now, Democrats like to hide from that. They like to ignore that. But this is reality. Republicans embarrassed by what Richard Nixon did during Watergate because he was honest. And honest politicians, no matter how popular, are never to be. And he is the most honest president, whether anyone wants to believe that or not, that there ever was. He never lies. He never lied. He stuck the course. He stayed to it. So, for everybody, Tamara Litch and likely now Pat King are not coming out of jail anytime soon. They're going to be imposed as though they are First Peoples, which I don't think that's true, but that's their claim, and we are in the Emergency Measures Act as well, so either way, they're not going to get out. Chris was lucky to get out. He was at the right time before Emergency Act was implemented, but now it's cemented. Careful, ladies and gentlemen, going forward. Now, the second part of this video, taxation. Everybody, big bad problems. Trudeau and Harper, and you can read this story. I'm sorry, no, none of you can read this story. You actually have to go to India to get the story, the same story written by the Globe and Mail, because if you don't have the money, you can't read the news coming forward in Canada. You're going to find that you're already being transformed. Twitter platform, you're not allowed to see translation of tweets anymore. We are going into that civil law socialism. This is all from the Liberal government. So now you have to painfully cut and paste tweets from other countries, friends you've made around the world. You're going to have to cut their tweets, Google Translate them yourself. Then you got to translate what you say if they don't speak English, and you got to put it into their language and then pin it to their tweets. That's what Twitter's doing now in Canada. That's how Twitter operates in Canada. All social media platforms, as well as all companies, only administer these things in the country as per your government. And right now, that's Justin Trudeau and the Liberals. That's what we get. So, people, stop blaming billionaires. Stop blaming everybody else. It is 100% your elected and appointed politicians. Whether you like it or not, that's the truth. The sooner Canadians can face that, the sooner we can move forward. The UN is not your enemy. Canada and the way it behaves in the UN with its aligned countries is the enemy inside the UN, which is also your enemy, the people's enemy. And that's none other than your elected and appointed politicians. So, what do I want to talk about taxation for? The big story that's ripping through Canada now, which is likely to be, I can promise you conservatives and liberals will like this right across the board because all politicians love to tax. They love to spend, but they love to tax when the spending has reached its load limits. We have massive debt now. Deficit financing that has to be done annually. Where is the shortfall revenue going to come from? Capital. Well, what's capital? Well, capital assets specifically. Well, what does that have to do with taxation? Well, the government now, all the smartest people who represent your conservative and liberals, who are also first class, the smartest Canadians, are telling you, hey, we found a great revenue source. You know how everybody pays property taxes on an assessed value of their home? Well, we're going to go with capital asset value taxation, where now the assessment of your house and the real estate sold around you, if your property, let's say, was purchased for $100,000 maybe 30 years ago, and now it's worth $800,000 or $1 million, or in Alberta, a property that you may have bought for $190,000 is now worth $400,000, $450,000, as all your neighbors around you are sold for that. The government will tax you on the capital asset value just to make sure you're paying your fair share. So now when taxes go, as they're doing income tax, they're going to try and add a capital asset value tax for all Canadians. And you know what's really sad here, folks? For those high-end, second-class, wealthy citizens, often foreign, well, in Canada, there's no charge on their foreign holdings. So they're just not going to hold anything of real value in Canada, in property value. They'll have their companies, but they're not going to buy big expensive places in Canada, big millionaire mansions. They're going to leave, dump those, and then just go build somewhere else. Because unlike USA, they don't follow you. You're not America first, meaning no matter where you go in the world, you're to be taxed on your foreign holdings. In Canada, you can run away. You can dump your money. You can get out of here. And there's nothing Canada's going to do about it. Because there are so many doing it, including the first class government officials themselves, that it's all of you, the small domestic business owner, you, the small domestic Canadian, who grows in value because of the government's overwhelming immigration numbers and lack of housing because there's no land settlement claims. Land values keep getting bolstered up higher and higher. They give loans to foreigners insured by you, the taxpayer. And yes, if you own property, your property value is going to go up. But what does it mean for you? Well, it means they're going to start doing positive capital gains tax, meaning not the revenue. It's you sitting on a property valued at this level. It's basically a federal and provincial way of charging you another property tax, a massive one, for the perceived sale value of your home, all the gains in value of your home. That's coming, folks. It's not fake. It's real news. If you're of the wealthier type who can afford to subscribe to multiple media news outlets that are paid by the government, who now charge you to hear these true stories, I don't know what to tell you. You just got to trust me. But you can go to India. India publishes the story. There's a lot of spelling mistakes. The translation wasn't done very well at all, but at least the story is free. If you struggle with understanding positive capital asset taxation, go look at it, read the story. You can look it up. There's several other terms from that story you're probably going to have to look up. Take your time. Make sure it's under, not Webster's, that's American. A lot of people screw up like that. Make sure you're using the right dictionary. Canadian Oxford. Know your country. Know how the government defines things. Know what's being applied to you. Thanks, that's my video. It needs to be shared. And learn a little bit about the First Peoples. That's what Canadians need to know now. Learn about atrocity. Learn about our Canadian justice system. Learn about the 1876 Indian Act. Before you start slamming reserves and First Peoples, realize they have no ability to generate any revenue by any way of municipal taxation. A chief in legal speak for Canada's Canadian Oxford has the equivalent of a city councillor. That's their highest title in all the reserves. That's all the government of Canada has ever given the First People. They are not able to collect taxes. There's no source of revenue besides the grace of companies exploiting the resources on First Peoples reserves. So if you're lucky enough to have a landmine and resources and a company is good enough to give you some kind of benefit from that, and I repeat, good enough, that's all the First People get. They rely 100% on the divinity of the federal and provincial politicians to send monies their way. You want to talk about unjust society? You want to talk about genocide? You want to talk about sick and perverse? All you have to do is look at Canada. Civil rights movements in the 60s for African Americans and the American Indian was huge and triumphant all the way through to the mid-70s, completed. A lot of monumental things were done. Not the same in Canada. Not absolutely at all for any of the Canadian Indians. None whatsoever. They're most brutalized people anywhere within North America today. And in fact, they don't match anything except when you start going out into the most horrific world genocidal countries. That's your country, that's you, that's Canada, that's your politicians. That's what you elect every 4 years, and then they appoint all kinds of human rights violators, and they continue on and on. Federally and absolutely 100% autocratically, provincially. That's your government. Pat King and Tamara are not going anywhere. Is it because of the Emergency Measures Act? Partially, but it's 100% also because it claimed Indian status, and now the judges have access to the Indian Act 1876. If you don't believe me, just go look at the statistics of how many Canadian Indians are in jail today, both provincially and federally. The laws are not the same. The criminal code is not applied the same. The justice system is not applied the same. They're not even treated as human beings because Canada is a gross human rights violator. Thanks. That's my video. It's not me. It's not. I know how it sounds. I know how it looks. I am only telling you the legal speak of your country. I keep that alive. I share that. It's not my beliefs. It's not what's right or wrong. I know it's absolutely wrong. It's about what is. It's about what your country is. Share. Get it out there. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Bye now.